hope you are all staying healthy and good. And welcome to what I think feels like the first Q&A of a new year. We've got a lot to cover today, so I'll get right to it. Now, I want to start by saying that yesterday was truly a historic day. The past few weeks have certainly been a very difficult time in our nation, but we now have a new president, and we also have the first woman and the first person of color as our vice president in the history of our country. And, you know, I think that the peaceful transition of power really is an amazing thing to see, especially in such a time of tension. And, you know, that and the swearing in of Vice President Harris, you know, really stands as a reminder that despite the challenges that we are facing as a country, we all have so much to be proud of. So I also found Amanda Gorman, her poem, to be really moving. For those of you who didn't watch it, she's the youngest inaugural poet in U.S. history. And I watched the poem. I thought it was great, and I watched it again with my daughters when I put them to bed last night. But I also have to say that I thought that President Biden's inaugural address was very good. You know, I appreciate both what he said about unity and the challenges ahead, but also his plain-spoken style. It you know, just felt very real to me, and you know, I thought that it was powerful. And you know, as someone who's running a company with the mission of bringing the world together, you know, I think that his focus on unity is basically exactly what we need to hear. And you know, I'm optimistic, especially from the early actions that he's taken so far, that he will help bring the country together and help move us forward. And I hope that regardless of where you are, you know, on the political spectrum, you know, I hope that we can all be rooting for his success. And indeed, in his first day, President Biden already issued a number of executive orders on areas that we as a company really care quite deeply about and have for some time. You know, areas like immigration, preserving DACA, and ending restrictions on travel from Muslim-majority countries, as well as other executive orders on climate and advancing racial justice and equity. And you know, I think that these were all important and positive steps. And I am looking forward to opportunities where Facebook is going to be able to work together with this new administration on some of their top priorities, starting with the COVID response. Now, in other news, this morning we made an announcement related to our oversight board, and I am going to turn it over to Nick Clegg, our head of global affairs, to talk about this in some more detail. So, Nick, are you on the line?
Yeah, I am, Mark. Thanks, Mark. Hi, everybody. So, as you may have seen, we've announced this morning, as Mark just said, that the decision we took on January the 7th to suspend Donald Trump's access to his Facebook and Instagram accounts, that decision to indefinitely suspend it, we're referring it to the Oversight Board. The Oversight Board, as you know, was established last year. It's a very significant institutional innovation. This has never happened before. It's completely independent of us. It can issue binding rulings that no one can sort of contradict in Facebook. It is populated by very accomplished, credible figures, ex-political leaders, jurists, scholars, human rights activists, and so on. And we have referred to the Oversight Board, because I know there are already a number of questions which have been coming in internally. We've referred, it comes in two parts. Firstly, we're asking the Oversight Board, which is the way that the Oversight Board is designed, a bit like a court, to decide whether the decision that we took on January the 7th is something that they agree with or not. and we hope, expect they will uphold our decision because it was a well-justified decision. We took that action very much in line with our policies, which apply to everybody, politicians or non-politicians. You can't incite violence on our platform, but they have a right to issue a binding decision on whether to uphold or reject the action we took on January the 7th. And then separately, we've asked them for any wider observations or recommendations they might have about how we should handle this really fraught issue of when and in what way we take action against political leaders, both here and abroad. And the reason why that is important is because, as many of you may have seen, well, like any decision that Facebook takes, we get lots of different reactions, often sort of polar opposite reactions. You know, some people saying that we should have acted earlier, and others saying that it was an abuse of private corporate power that we did so. But there has been quite a lot of disquiet expressed by many leaders around the world, from the president of Mexico to Alexander Navalny in Russia, and Chancellor Angela Merkel, and others saying, well, this shows that private companies have got too much power and they should be only making these decisions in a way that is framed by democratically agreed rules. We agree with that. Mark would be very clear about that ideally we wouldn't be taking these decisions on our own. We would be taking these decisions in line with and in conformity with democratically agreed rules and principles. And at the moment, those democratically agreed rules don't exist. We still have to take decisions in real time. We cannot duck these decisions altogether. And that's why the Oversight Board is such an important innovation, because it enforces accountability and transparency on the decisions we've taken, and hopefully gives us some guidance on how we should be dealing with similar situations in the future. I hope that's helpful. Over to you, Mark.
All right. Yeah. Thanks, Nick. That was. And, you know, before we go to the other top questions of the week, there are a couple of other items that I want to cover up front. The first is that I know that there are a number of the questions this week are about the WhatsApp privacy policy news from last week. So, you know, before I jump in and answer those, we have Will Cathcart, who's our head of WhatsApp, on the line to give an update on that. So go for it, Will.
Thanks, Mark. Hi, everyone. Will from the WhatsApp team. Before talking about the update, I just think it's really important that I reiterate we take privacy extremely seriously. We're protecting the private, sensitive conversations of billions. That's a big deal. And across the board, we're very careful about what data we even collect from people. It's very focused on operating the service and keeping people safe. And I think it's important for everyone to remember that with WhatsApp, Facebook brought end-to-end encryption to people across the world. This is a big deal for privacy. We fought hard for it at a cost for this to be something that's mainstream. Okay, so update. What happened? So we're making an update to our privacy policy and our terms. The reason we're doing this is to describe new features that we're building for people who want to talk to businesses. These are optional features where you want to message a business, and in particular, the changes we're making are around large businesses. Think, you know, messaging an airline or a utility or even a government. You know, the government of Indonesia just launched a bot where you can sign up for your vaccine if you're a healthcare worker. Think that kind of thing. And in the update, we're also putting a lot more information about what we already do. Not changing what we do, putting more information in, because it's been 5 or 6 years since we updated it. To be really clear, we're not changing anything about people's personal messages. And that's where there's been a lot of confusion. I'll be honest, we have to understand we need to communicate this stuff really clearly. TOS and privacy policy updates, they're tough to land well in general. We're trying to simplify complex concepts, at times legal concepts, into small spaces. You need to be accurate, which makes simple language hard. But at the end of the day, we need to communicate this in a way that people understand and that they get. And we didn't get that right here. That's on us. I'm sure everyone on the team's feeling it, and it's definitely on me. Given that, what are we doing now? We're doing everything we can to put accurate information out to address the confusion and even some of the misinformation we've seen about what's going on. We got a bunch of accurate information into social channels. We've been hearing from a lot of people pointing to our FAQ, which is now one of the top pages on our website, sending infographics around. And most importantly, we're taking the time to just communicate directly to people in the product. So we pushed the date of the update back. We actually just launched in a few countries, and we're going global, our first message from WhatsApp inside of WhatsApp status. It's the first time we've used our Stories product to communicate to people about something that's going on. I think that's really, really important that people hear from us directly. And we're going to relaunch the flow for the update, give people lots of time to see it. We're going to communicate very clearly about what this actually is, and most importantly, what's not changing, which is where we've seen the confusion. And then from here, we go back to proving ourselves and proving to people why WhatsApp's the right product for them. They have a lot of choice. We know that it's very easy for people to switch. They have multiple messaging apps on their phone. A lot of people do. So we've got a lot more privacy features coming, and we're going to prove ourselves with what we build and how we communicate it from here. So with that, back to you, Mark.
All right, thanks, Will. That was helpful, and we'll cover the questions in a bit more detail as well in a minute. The last thing I wanted to hit up front is last week we made an important announcement that we hired and created a role of a vice president of civil rights, and Roy Austin joined us in that role. So given how important this role is, I want to take a few minutes up front today to welcome Roy to the company, and just to say how glad I am that he has joined us. This role is a pretty big deal institutionally, and we created it to make sure that civil rights aren't just protected across our platforms and services, but that we can bake this kind of experience and perspective into how we operate across the whole company. So with that, welcome, Roy, and thanks for being with us today.
Huge thank you, Mark, and a thank you to Cheryl and Jen, and so many of you have reached out to me, and I feel really happy to be here. Including those who reached out to me are Maxine Williams and Lori Goldler, who I actually went to college with, and so I've known many important parts of this company for going on 30 years now. Sorry, Maxine and Lori, to point that out. This is day 3 for me, and now that I've figured out, I think, how to work a new computer, a new phone, chat, which I never had before, I'm not sure that there's any hurdle that's going to be too high for me to climb, and so I look forward to doing that. Now, I have to say that this role, working on civil rights issues here at Facebook, is really personal to me. For many people, too many people, what happened to George Floyd was new, and they hadn't seen it before. But I've spent close to 25 years working on these issues. Many of you may not know that 1,000 people here in the United States are killed by the police each and every year, more than 1,000 people. Disproportionately, those people are Black. I started my career in the Civil Rights Division as a prosecutor, working on hate crimes and police misconduct cases, and worked on these cases around the country. I had a chance to work with Doug Jones, the former senator for Alabama, on the 16th Street Baptist Church burning that led to the murder of 4 little Black girls. I had a chance to work with Michelle Alexander on a lawsuit against the California Highway Patrol for racial profiling, and I had a chance to depose Sheriff Joe Arpaio for his racist policies against Latinos in Maricopa County, Arizona. What is different for me, and what is different about what happened with George Floyd, is that 2,000 communities around the country protested that what happened. 2,000 multiracial, multi-ethnic communities protested, and that hadn't happened before, and that happened because of social media and Facebook. Despite the important work that we were doing in the Civil Rights Division and in the White House on racial profiling and policing and voting, none of that stuff, even with the bully pulpit that the president has, got the lift that these things get when social media is involved. This is personal to me because I'm a user of these products. I'm a consumer. I use Facebook. My kids use Instagram. I use WhatsApp for a client that I had who was his parents were in Israel. Oculus, I wonder whether or not we can use Oculus to help a white police officer understand what it feels like to be a young Black man who's stopped and searched and arrested by the police. Brian Stevenson talked about proximity and the importance of proximity for us to understand what different people feel, and the importance of proximity, and Facebook and Oculus, they make proximity much easier. So let me just end by saying, look, I want to learn from all of you. I know so many people in this company care deeply about civil rights and want this company to stand for civil rights. And I want every major decision to run through a civil rights lens. So hopefully I have a chance to partner with as many of you as possible. and to make not only this country live up to its ideas, but to make this company live up to its ideas. So thank you so much, Mark, for this great opportunity.
All right, thanks, Roy, and again, welcome. Your experience and perspective, I think, are going to be very important here, and I'm looking forward to getting a chance to work together personally. I guess with that, let's hand it over to Melinda, who can walk us through some of the top questions.
Hey there, Mark. Hello, everyone. Hope everyone's having a great week. And as always, pleasure to be on the line with you today as we bring you the top voted questions for today's company Q&A. So without further ado, let's get to the first question, which was the most upvoted in Employee FYI on the poll. So Mark, they asked the following. The Facebook brand has become toxic and we're facing pushback. For instance, Oculus account linking, the WhatsApp app upgrade. What are we doing to improve our brand?
Sure. So a number of things on this. First, people are understandably sensitive about how their data is used and how it gets connected between different services. So I think that is not surprising, and I think we need to make sure that we are very sensitive in how we handle that. We've always taken it seriously, but I think the WhatsApp toss is also a reminder that we need to do a better job of how we communicate about this and explain what we're doing in our products, that misinformation doesn't spread. But for the brand overall, I'd say a couple of high-level points. The first is a pattern that I've observed, which is that we develop several different products and brands, including two that you mentioned. Our VR products and WhatsApp, Instagram, Messenger as well. And one of the patterns that we've seen is that basically a lot of the time good things that we do or build in those experiences get attributed to the local brands, whereas negative things that people are worried about get attributed to the corporate Facebook brand. And I think that that's not really an accurate reflection of the value that is being created. I think it is as true that the kind of investment and the talent that has gone into building our most recent Quest VR devices. Almost all of that was done at Facebook. And I think we need to make sure that we do a better job of telling that story, so that way people associate the positive of the different brands with Facebook and not just areas that they're potentially worried about. So that's an ongoing effort that we're working on. You've seen some of the work that we're doing to increase attribution when we're talking about the Oculus brand or the Instagram brand or the WhatsApp brand, to make sure that people understand that those are linked to Facebook. That's partially so people understand how their data is used, which is important, and partially so people understand where the innovation is coming from, that it's not some separate place. But I think that that's going to be very important, because it's not sustainable if people attribute all of the good stuff to somewhere else and all of the bad stuff to Facebook. The other observation that I would make is one of the things that we've seen is that there is a natural buoyancy to our brand when people use our products, but there isn't negative stuff being written about the company every single day. So, we see this because our brand is different in different countries. A lot of our employees are in the US, where our brand has some of the most challenges, but in a number of other countries around the world, our brand is in the top 10% of all brands, and those are many large countries that are important to us. And in most countries, I think we're certainly in the top third or half of brands. So I think that shows a little bit what we've seen is there's a different environment in these different places in terms of the issues that people are talking about. And we also saw early in COVID, for example, when for a little bit people basically were very focused on COVID, and were using our products, but we weren't really the focus of as much attention at that point. When people naturally use our products, they understand the value that they bring. And we saw our brand metrics increase over that period. But when there's such important, day-to-day scrutiny of the company, it is important, of course, it is very difficult to build a positive brand in that environment. So, among my hopes for the next period, it's that, not only will we continue delivering a lot of proactive value through the products that we're building across all the brands, and that people will see that is coming from our company, all those innovations. But I also think that the investments that we've been making for years now in content moderation and integrity, and in privacy, and building up more infrastructure around that, that those things can reduce the frequency of flare-ups. And also I'm somewhat hopeful that just in the kind of new administration and kind of environment, that if the calls for unity work and the temperature in the country can come down a bit, that I think that would be positive, not just for us, but for the whole country, and for everyone who's trying to build things and deliver value.
All right, Mark, thanks so much for answering that question. Let's get to our next one that comes pre-recorded on behalf of the employee that presented it. Let's bring it up on the screen right now.
Hi, Mark. I'm Kevin, located in the New York office on the community partnerships team. My question for you is, there's a growing movement to move from WhatsApp to Signal or Telegram. Do we see this affecting WhatsApp product usage or growth metrics at all?
Sure. So before I answer that, let me just say, I think Will is still on the line. I know Alex, our CMO, is on the line as well. So, Alex, if you wanted to jump in with anything from the last question, go for it. Will, if you want to jump in with anything on this one, go for it. But the high-level answer to this second question is that, as has been reported, we did see increases in the downloads from competitor apps, which I think highlights how competitive the space is and how easy it can be to switch from one app to another. But through the last period that this toss-up hit has been going on, we've seen the usage of WhatsApp and downloads and all of that continue to grow. So that concern that you're mentioning hasn't been really the primary one that we've been focused on. But of course, making sure that we communicate what we're doing and build trust, and that people know that WhatsApp is very private and is a steward of their most private moments and conversations is incredibly important. And look, I actually think the reality on this is that WhatsApp is incredibly strong on the dimensions of privacy and security that most people are focused on a day-to-day basis, which is protecting their messages, making sure that their messages and their intimate moments aren't shared more broadly. As Will said before, we were the first, and I think at this point may still be the only large-scale multi-platform product that has rolled out end-to-end encryption by default. And in a lot of places, that's a controversial stance, but we do it because we want to make sure that your conversations stay between you and aren't available to other people for hacking. In some places where people may trust their governments less, and to us, we can't see the content of people's end-to-end encrypted messages unless they choose to share it with us. And we doubled down on that. By now, we're rolling out disappearing messages and kind of encouraging more people to download to turn that on. And we're working towards rolling that out a lot more broadly. So, not only are all the messages going to be end-to-end encrypted, but they're also going to increasingly disappear after 7 days, which means that not only are they shared, but not beyond you and the person you're communicating with, but they aren't even going to live on really beyond 7 days. So I think those are the dimensions of privacy and security that most people are very focused on. And I think on those fronts, we actually excel beyond any of the other apps that are out there. And I think it's going to be important for us to continue innovating on this, and we will certainly keep doing that. Will, is there anything that you wanted to jump in on that?
No, I mean, love your point on where we excel on the privacy and security that people actually care about. And look, we've got a lot of competitors. They're fierce. They're going to try to make moments out of this. I actually think we could stand behind what we actually do compared to them. For those who don't realize this, Telegram doesn't even have end-to-end encryption for groups. And by default for your messages, it's not on. So what we do is actually on the substance very good. And it's on us to go communicate that clearly to people so they know it.
Thing I'd say is, like, I really agree with the point you made on the fact that we're not just the US. And so if you look around the world, if you look at Brazil, WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram, these are very successful, very positive brands in those countries. I'd also say on the association point you made, like Pratiti Raichaudhuri, our head of research, pinged me and noted that when we showed the association between Facebook Inc. and Instagram, measures of utility went up for Instagram. And so we're even seeing some places where positive aspects are flowing between the brands in a really positive way. I think we do need to do stuff to respond, which is another question lower down the thread, but like we need to do stuff to respond. We'll hit it well, like getting in our product, talking to our users directly in product, saying what we stand for is really, really important and has worked for us in stopping the spread of misinformation around this WhatsApp status update. And it's something we have to think about, like compliance moments, consent moments, toss moments. These are marketing moments as well as compliance moments. We have to do both. We have to avoid unforced errors. And when we talk to our users directly about the value that they are getting, like they see it, they listen to us, they hear it. So we have to do more of that. And that's something that we're intending to do across all of our products, getting out there and talking to people about the value they're getting in the product. And I think that's a big chunk of the stuff we need to do to move our brands forward. But above all, I think, remember, the US isn't the only country. There's a lot of countries with a lot of different positions.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for being on the line for this Q&A. I love seeing everyone's faces to answer some of these questions. All right, Mark, let's continue. Up next, we have another pre-recorded question for you regarding our vision for Facebook Blue app. Let's roll it.
Hi, Mark. This is Anirudh from the Menlo Park office. My question is, what is our 2-year, 5-year, and 10-year vision for the Facebook Blue app?
All right. I have to admit, when you introduced yourself as being from the Menlo Park office, I did smile a little bit. As you are talking from your living room, it's like, what does that even mean anymore? But hopefully one day soon, we will get to be back in the office. In terms of the vision for the Facebook app over the medium term and the long term, I think that there are two big themes to think about. The first is a shift from, for the first 10 or 15 years of the product, we really focused on helping people connect with friends and family as the primary thing. Now, that's always going to be a core and foundational part of the experience. But now we are also focusing on helping people connect with communities and shared interests, different organizations, branching out beyond the people who they already know to forming and being able to join supportive communities of people who share interests and values and can help you grow as a person and develop your interests and be entertained and meet new people who kind of share interests and all of that. And the reason for that is, I think this is very important for helping to rebuild the social fabric in our country and around the world. People, there are different kind of layers of support that I think people need in their lives. Most immediately, a strong family and friends, I think, is important. But then, we all kind of have a layer of communities and organizations, whether it's this company or clubs that you're a part of or religious organizations or, different other kind of institutions or groups that we're a part of, or different communities, formal or informal, those help us provide a lot of our support and help us develop as people and help develop our values. And then of course, beyond that, there are things that get provided by society and by the government as a safety net. But I think, one observation that I've made is that I think often we spend a lot of time talking about, what the government can or cannot do, and not enough time talking about the importance of communities in our lives. And there's been this trend over the last 40 or 50 years, predating the internet, where in the US and in a number of other countries, people's membership in communities has been on the decline. And that means that social fabric has been getting weaker. And maybe that's accelerated a bit since the internet adoption took off, starting in the 90s and 2000s, but it's been going on for 20 or 30 years before then as well. And one of the ways that I think that we can contribute in a very important way to the world right now is helping people join and become a part of groups that are very meaningful to them. Not just groups where they get kind of some interesting content and click like on something, maybe makes them smile, but groups where you actually build real relationships. And I hear from a number of friends who are part of a parenting group or a health group for a condition that they have, or they move to a new place and they join a community group and that's how they get settled in that new place. All these different types of things. And increasingly, one of the things that we pay attention to is how many people have a group that is so meaningful to them on Facebook that they view that as the core part of their social networking experience. And we're above 500 million right now in terms of people who we've helped connect to a group that they call very meaningful to them. Part of our 5-year goal has been to help more than 1 billion people connect to groups that are very meaningful to them. If we can do that, that will have gone a long way towards reversing this long-term decline in community membership that has been going on. So that's a big part of the vision for the next 5 or 10 years. We've already been working on this for a few years, ever since we changed our mission. I think it was back in 2017 to give people the power to build community and bring the world closer together. So this has been a long focus. Of course, I should say while we're talking about this that a big part of this focus is also making sure that the groups that people connect to are healthy and positive. And we've taken steps in recent months, for example, to stop recommending political and civic groups just because we were worried that might contribute to polarization. And I think we'll probably continue excluding those from recommendations, just because. And there are a number of other things, of course, that if a group is creating harm, we'll take the group down even more than taking it out of recommendations. But we're very sensitive and focused on making sure that the groups that people are creating can have a positive impact on helping to rebuild the social fabric. That's probably the main thing, but the Facebook app it contains multitudes. So I think it's probably worth talking about at least one other aspect of the strategy over the next period is that different people have different social needs for what they want to do. Some people are more interested in buying and selling things through a part of a social utility like marketplace. Some people are more interested in dating, right? If you're single, some people are more interested in news. And some people plan events. Not all of these events and not all of these features are going to be used by everyone, right? Everyone has friends and family. Almost everyone has communities that they care about. Those, I think, are going to be ubiquitous tools that a lot of people want to use. But a big part of the strategy and focus is also now to go build out the social tools that, that maybe a few 100 million people will find useful. So even if it's, just, a tenth of the people who are on Facebook, part of our goal is to make it so that everyone who uses Facebook has at least one or two other social tools that are really helpful to them, even if those tools are different from other people in their lives. So, not everyone is going to use dating, but But our dating tool has grown very quickly and is very successful. News, not everyone is a news junkie, but for the people who do like it, it's very useful and is going very well. So that's an important part of the strategy as well, is just to build out those kind of social tools for those who want to use them.
Very nice. And we're looking at the comments real time as you're answering, Mark, and people are really feeling the part about not being able to come into the office. Mariah said, every time I drive past the Seattle office, my heart warms. And another person said on their first day, they drove around the MPK parking lot just because it was sentimental to them. So lots of people ready to go back to the office when it's actually open that are full-time employees. So very cool feelings from everybody. All right, let's get to our next upvoted question. So it's back to WhatsApp. Mark, was the WhatsApp TOS rollout handled well? And the part, this is similar to the other question that we already answered, but it says there were lots of chatter talking about folks switching to apps like Signal. So in your mind, what could we have done better?
Sure. So, as Will and Alex already said, the short answer is no. I don't think we handled this as well as we should have. And I think the team is already engaged in debriefing this and has a number of lessons in order to make sure that we do a better job going forward, not just on WhatsApp TOSes, but we have other TOS updates for different apps and services, and we need to make sure we do better on those too. So that way, we minimize the amount of misinformation that gets created, and minimize the amount of confusion that gets created. I think Alex really summarized this well when he said that we need to view these moments when we're explaining something that we're doing, not just as a compliance moment, where we're kind of going through, legalistic language about what might happen or what we might do, but we also need to view these as moments to explain the value of where of the products that we're building, what we're trying to do, how they're going to work, things that may not be legally required or required from a compliance perspective in executing a TOS update, but I think increasingly should just be the best practices for how we communicate about changes that we're making. And now I think over the years, it's not just this TOS update. This isn't the first time that we've rolled something out that's been a little bit overly legalistic and has spooked people. So I think that's a lesson that hopefully we've learned enough by this point, and we won't recreate going forward. The other thing that I think we need to do is these updates tend to go better when we make it so that when you're asking a person for a permission, it's as close as possible to the functionality that they're going to be turning on or experiencing. And for example, in this case, the basic change was around the messages are all still end-to-end encrypted, but we're going to make it so that businesses can use other Facebook tools to manage their messages, which means that the business might take their messages and kind of put them in a Facebook tool. That means that our system might technically be able to see the messages, but only because the business took the message, which is end-to-end encrypted, and chose to use the tool that we built. And that's really only relevant when you as a consumer choose to message a business. And the fact that we rolled this out broadly without really explaining that, and rolled out broadly to probably more people who we rolled this out to have never messaged a business than those who have. Rather than doing it in line or in context, I think makes these things a bit more challenging. So those are the basic lessons. I do want to say I felt like the team reacted quite well once it was clear that there was significant confusion. I think everyone got together quickly to understand what was going on and figure out how to communicate about it clearly. Will and the team did a number of different interviews around the world, and got activated quickly to make sure that we were using the product to push out authoritative and accurate information about this update, similar to what we've been able to do for other important issues. And I think that there's already a lot of good learning that's happening here. Will or Alex, do you want to add anything on that? I think we've covered this a bunch, but if you want to jump in, go for it. All right.
All right, excellent. Let's move to rounding out the top 5 with this last question. So, Mark, do we use any data from WhatsApp, including metadata, for the purpose of serving ads? If so, could you tell us which data and how it's actually being used?
Sure. So, I think when people ask this, they're generally asking, do you see the messages? Are you able to look at any of the messages or use the message content or anything like that for ads? The answer to that is no. So I think that this basically just works the way that you'd expect, which is, if there are products like click to WhatsApp ads, where a business can buy an ad that can show up in Facebook or Instagram, and instead of clicking off to their website, they can click to a WhatsApp thread, and when they do that, of course, then we know that, you've clicked to the WhatsApp thread and are engaging with a business in WhatsApp, even though we don't see the messages. So that type of thing, knowing that you've kind of closed the loop there, we do use in ads. And I think that that's kind of intuitive to people, and they would expect that. There may be a couple of other cases like that. I think we have some basic sense of who you, like whether you've messaged a business, even if we don't know what the content is that you've said, because that's all end-to-end encrypted. So it's just kind of intuitive things like that that I think we need to have access to. We need to know who people. It's helpful to understand if who someone is messaging, to know if there's spam or any other things going on across the network. So it's just that kind of basic context, but I think that's kind of intuitively what people might expect. And I think when people ask this question, it's really, are you using content from WhatsApp? And the answer there is no. Will, correct me though if I'm getting anything wrong on this. If there's any more context they want to add.
No, just to echo it and say it even stronger. A lot of what you might imagine we're not using. So definitely not the end-to-end encrypted, what you're messaging your friend, we can't see it. Even on Mark's point about who you've messaged, even there we actually don't not just use it for ads, but even log it in almost all cases across the board, just as a privacy feature. Click to WhatsApp is one. Really, it would be simpler if we could just say no, there's nothing we do with ads, but we also need to be clear and to cover all the cases. Click to WhatsApp is the clear one. You see an ad on Facebook, you see an ad on Instagram, you click it. Obviously, we know you click it. You only see the ad if you have WhatsApp on your phone. There's a little bit of interaction data with the business, although again, if you're messaging a small business, it's end-to-end encrypted, so we can't see the content even there. The other thing is, just because we don't see the data, the businesses do. If you're messaging businesses, they know you're messaging them. They know the message content, and they can use that on ads platforms across the internet. It's up to each business. A lot of businesses make customer lists. Some of them even do it with Facebook. So we also need to be careful not to overpromise here. What we've leaned on is just being really clear when you're messaging with a business, telling you, and making that clear to people. And I think people generally get that. But, most of the examples you might think of for data that we even have, we might not even have it. And even if we do, it's pretty locked down.
Excellent. All right. Thank you all. Okay, so before we get into some of the questions that are popping up in the comment section, I have to make a comment that I'm seeing in the comments. Bookshelf game is strong from Will and Nick, and they want to know where your bookshelf is, Mark. So I got to say, everybody's loving the bookshelf backgrounds for our Zoom call today.
Yeah, no bookshelf here. But but I have this curtain, which I think is an improvement over having a second plant there. For those of you who watch these for a while, so at least there's that. But I also noticed that their backgrounds are definitely good. should we roll through to some of the other questions? I'm looking at a bunch of stuff on the comments. I think that there's a bunch of questions about, I was talking about, missing being in Menlo Park. Someone said I miss MPK2. Any COVID update, any news? There's a couple of others. You mentioned COVID response. What are some other ways we might be able to work with Biden administration? So probably pretty helpful to just talk about where we are with COVID right now and what we're seeing. And I guess here are a few main points. One is there's basically this race going on right now. On the one hand, to ramp up vaccinations as quickly as possible. And on the other hand, we're at a point where there are more people who are infected than ever before. And that's actually creating some of its own perils, which is what we're starting to see with this UK variant and the South African variant, and there may even be a new variant of COVID in California, is COVID is interesting in that it actually is a virus that mutates very slowly and predictably. And this is something that we've studied a lot at the BioHub that I helped create through the Chan Zuckerberg initiative. It's actually just as a short aside, you can basically track the lineage of any specific instance of COVID that a person has gotten because the virus mutates at such a predictable and slow rate. If you see two people who got the virus, you can basically have a sense of how many hops there were between those two people getting the virus. So it actually, in general, until recently, people felt like the risk of it mutating and causing something that was problematic was relatively low. But now, because of the sheer number of infections, even though the rate of mutation per infection is low, because there are so many infections, we're now actually starting to see globally a relatively accelerated pace of mutation. And that's problematic because the UK variant, I think, is troublesome enough by itself because it spreads faster. But I think that there's some concerns, especially with the South African variant, that the core protein is sufficiently different from the initial COVID-19, that some of the drugs that were designed against the initial COVID-19 may not actually be fully effective against it. Or it might be possible that people who got the initial COVID might be able to get this variant again. And people are still studying it, so they don't know that for certain yet. There's some concerns about it, but certainly if the current infection rate continues and the rate of mutation increases, the odds of us getting to a place where we have a variant like what we were afraid of increases. So I think we really are engaged in this pretty critical race at this point to roll out the vaccines quickly, so that way not only do we protect people from the existing variants, but hopefully can avoid a fate where it basically reaches an escape velocity and you have sort of a yearly strand of COVID, just like you have a yearly strand of flu, which I think could be very troublesome. And of course, we'd have to approach that somewhat differently. Now, I have to say I'm a little more optimistic about the vaccines. It's sometimes this stuff ramps up. It starts off a little bit slower, but I think we'll be able to make a lot of progress over the next few months. It's certainly possible if you look at what countries like Israel have been able to do, and I think we should be able to get that done in the U.S. And I mean, one quick note: Jeff Zients, who served on Facebook's board of directors for a period, is now in the Biden administration and is the person in charge of coordinating their vaccine. I guess the whole COVID response, not just the vaccine part. And Jeff is a person who, after having some time working with him, who I have a lot of confidence in his leadership and his ability to make progress on this. So that's kind of the update on this. But I would encourage all of you to really take extra precautions to stay safe over the next few months. I think this is a fraught period, but hopefully if we can get through this next period, we will be on an improving trajectory after that, even if it still takes a little while to kind of fully resolve this how we'd like. Let's see what else we're seeing. I see a question for Nick. It's why are we just involving the oversight board now? Should they have been involved in the original decision? How long will they have to decide? Nick, do you want to walk through this process and what people should expect here?
Yeah, totally. So just to be clear about what the oversight board is and isn't, it's not a board which we've established to sort of substitute for our content policy team or our ability to take real-time decisions in real time. Think about it more like a kind of court that has the ability after an event to pass a judgment on whether the right decision was made or not. It's not there to provide sort of real-time operational guidance. It is there to provide a check on and to enforce accountability on our decisions. The reason why we have referred it to the board today is because we made the announcement on January the 7th that we would indefinitely suspend Donald Trump's use of his Instagram and Facebook accounts indefinitely and at least for 2 weeks in order to ensure the smooth and peaceful transition of power. And so that 2-week period is now up. The inauguration has happened yesterday, so entirely in line with the announcement we made on January the 7th. Today is the time the sensible time to refer it to the oversight board. The oversight board has up to 90 days, but it can do it more quickly to arrive at its own decision. And to be really clear, the bit that is binding from the oversight board, this is the way it's been designed, is the sort of yay or nay decision that they will make on whether we took the right decision January the 7th. In other words, will they uphold the decision we took, the action we took to indefinitely suspend his account, or should we, or is it to be reversed? And that is binding. The non-binding bit is any wider recommendations or observations or views that they share with us about how we should deal with political speech and political bans on political leaders and so on. And since I saw that this was asked, I'll just again be very clear that the idea of the oversight board is that over time, the decisions that the oversight board arrives at will create precedents which we will then have to absorb into our policies and reflect in our ongoing content decisions. So it's like a precedent-setting court, and that's what we hope over time will be a pattern that will be established as the oversight board takes its decisions.
All right. Well, I think we're pretty close to the end here, so maybe we should just wrap on that note. So thanks, Nick. A quick reminder for everyone: at the last Q&A, one of the questions was asking if we would consider doing an HR-focused Q&A, so that way people could ask those questions in a different forum. And we're going to be doing that. So next week we were doing an HR Q&A where Lori is going to be doing the company Q&A instead of me for a dedicated people at Q&A session. And we'll get feedback after that and see how that goes and see if that's something that people want to continue. And we'll share an event poll in People FYI, so you can submit your questions for that Q&A, which will be on which I guess will be next week. All right, and with that, I hope you all are having as good of a week as possible, and I hope you all stay healthy and safe. And I will see you all soon. And here's actually before we wrap, we're continuing this tradition that we had when we were back in the office of wrapping up by reminding ourselves of and telling a story of how people are using our products for something that is meaningful in their lives. Because while we're here, we talk a lot about our strategy and internal issues and things like that. But the reason why we're here, of course, is to serve people and help people connect and in ways that are meaningful to them. And I just always think it's important to take a moment to ground these sessions in that. So let's go to that.